Welcome to Illuminating Catholics, podcast of the Diocese of Sioux City. I'm Dawn Prosser, Director of Communications for the Diocese. Together with Carmen Bauer of the Faith Formation Office, we will shed light upon topics of faith in the modern church. Our guests include Catholic clergy, religious sisters, and other experts in their fields to help us understand what's happening in the church today. We will explore issues, even the tough ones, and find answers to common questions about Catholicism. Thank you for joining us for today's Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church.
Welcome back to the Illuminating Catholics podcast. I am Carmen Bauer, the Director of Faith Formation for the Diocese of Sioux City.
And I'm Dawn Prosser. I'm Director of Communications for the Diocese.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode, and thanks for following us. Today, we welcome two of our retired priests from different areas of the diocese, Father Rich Ball, who lives in Mapleton, and Father Tom Hart, who lives in Humboldt. They may technically be retired from active ministry, but they stay very, very busy, and we are so happy to have them here to share their stories on today's podcast. So welcome to Father Ball and Father Hart.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much for coming in. So our listeners would really love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds, especially if they had you in their parish or school. So they would be super excited about that. Just share a little bit about where you're from, maybe a little bit about your vocation story, and of course your assignments where you've served. So just like a little biography. People just really love this part. So we'll just have Father Ball go first. We'll go in alphabetical order.
Glad to be here. I got a little information about who I am, where I grew up, and my vocation. I grew up in a very small town of Duncombe, Iowa. That's between Fort Dodge and Webster City. I grew up with my mom, my dad, and I had my grandmother live with us. And she lived with us. She was 89 when she passed away. So, and she moved into the house 2 years after my mom and dad were married. So that was part of our family. I had two older brothers, one who has passed away. I still have a brother that's living, 11 years older than me. I happen to be 74, almost 75 come April. I had three older sisters and two younger sisters. I still joke about when people say, "Why did you become a priest?" I said, I had so many women around me when I grew up, I'd do anything to get away from us. But they were just awesome. They were awesome, and they taught me so much about life and how to live my religious life so much better. So I went to school in Duncombe, then they closed the school. I went to school in Webster City, and then a good priest by the name of Father Louis Kolash, may he rest in peace, became our pastor, and he said to all the parents that had kids, "You should send at least one child to St. Edmunds in Fort Dodge." And my sisters all got together and said, "We're not moving, we're not leaving each other." And so I was chosen. Little did I know, so as a sophomore, I went to Fort Dodge, St. Edmunds. They were amazingly good about my vocation. I did not even think about being a priest when I graduated. Was sure that I was supposed to be a teacher. I was sure I was supposed to go to Iowa State. I was just sure, and then out of the blue, someone said, "Have you ever thought about being a priest?" Now I know that there's been a lot of people telling me that. Never heard of one of them. But this guy out of the clear blue asked me in the middle of the night when I was working at Georgia Pacific, "Have you thought about being a priest?" And I couldn't get it out of my head. I went and talked to Father Kolash. And we ended up going down to Conception, Missouri. I spent 4 years there at Conception, fighting every year, saying, "I'm not going to be a priest, I'm not going to be a priest." And the Lord kept saying, "Yes, you are, yes, you are." And 4 years later, I went to the bishop and said, "I guess I'm going to join the diocese because I think the Lord wants me to be a priest." And I knew that with all my heart. And he said, "Where do you think about going?" I said, "Oh, I'm thinking about Denver." And he goes, "No, St. Paul, Minnesota."
Okay.
And that's when I learned about obedience real quick. And I went there, had an amazingly good 4 years. And that was back in the day that you were assigned 3 years and then you moved, 3 years and you moved. So I had a lot of different parishes to be part of their life with. I started off by going to Carroll, Iowa, and then I went from Carroll, I went over to Sioux City, and then from Sioux City I went to Algona, Algonah was very short. It was supposed to stay 3 years there. We had a new bishop, and he came and he said, "Now, Richard, I want you to be here for 3 years. You love it here." And I said, "Thank you, Bishop." And 2 weeks later, he called me up and said, "We have a problem. You can teach." And I said, "Yes." That was back in the day that we taught. Mm-hmm. All the priests taught. We just didn't go to a school. We taught. And he said, "I need you in Fort Dodge." So I went to Fort Dodge. And then that's when I became, 2 years later, I became a pastor. And I went to Gilmer City and Rolfe. And then from Gilmer City and Rolfe, I went over to Merrill and Ellendale so that I could teach at Galen. Once again, I taught there when I was a deacon as well. And then I was there, and then I thought I was going to go to Granville, and the bishop said, "Nope, I'm going to send you down to Dow City Charter Oak and Ute," and was there for 7 years. And then I went up to Granville and had the Catholic school there for 7 years, and then I was called up on vacation, and the bishop said, "Oh, where are you?" I said, "I'm on vacation. I love to fish." I was out fishing on the ocean, as a matter of fact. And he said, "Well, I'll call you back later." And I said, No. I need to know now. And he said, "Well, I'm thinking about sending you to Ida Grove and have a couple of parishes there as well, Odebolt and Holstein." And that's where I ended up there. I said, "Yep, if it's open, I'll take it." And so I ended up there, and that's when we had those kind of changes. And I lost Odebolt, and I lost Holstein, but I gained Danbury, and I gained Mapleton. And I was there for 10 years. Because when I was assigned, I said, "Now, Bishop, I don't want to be moved in 7 years and just have 3 years to go to someplace." And he agreed with that. And so I was there 10 years. And so I've been retired for 4 years. And I thought for sure I was going to go up to Algonah to retire. It's one of my things that I believe that you should plan ahead. But the Lord had different ideas, and so did Father Bill McCarthy. And he said, "Why don't you come to Mapleton? We never have a priest retire in these small communities." And being from a small town, he convinced me with a couple of his parishioners to move down there. And I said, "Why not?" And so that's how I ended up, thankfully, in Mapleton for the last 4 years.
All right. Thank you for that. We'll have you talk a little bit more about your time there. I can't believe it's been 4 years since you retired, just for the record. And Father Hart, can you share a little bit about where you're from and your vocation story and your assignments leading up to your retirement?
Okay. Well, I grew up between Humboldt, Iowa, and Gilmer City, Iowa. And we actually belonged to St. John's Parish in Gilmer City. But Mom and Dad, as I was growing up, always did all their business and stuff here in Humboldt. Actually, when I was born and baptized here at St. Mary's in Humboldt. So this is kind of my home area where I'm at right now, And I was born and raised, grew up on a farm, and helped, my dad, of course, on the farm. I went to St. John's in Gilmer City for grade school, and I attended Pocahontas Catholic for high school, because at that time the parish, St. John's, had a school bus and was taking all the students over to Pocahontas Catholic in Pocahontas. And so that's where I went to high school, and made some good friends there, and friendships with some of the priests that were there. Father Tom Nash would be one of them, and Father Eddie Adams was my pastor there at St. John's in Gilmer City, and a very powerful influence for me for thinking about being a priest. I got to know him, and a lot of jobs for him. Mowed the parish grounds, went and got the mail for him, and just different things like that. And so we grew pretty close, and that's where I started thinking about priesthood. Was especially from Father Eddie Adams. So, and then after high school, went to Loras College, and then after Loras, I went to the seminary, and at Loras, I got my degree in history and also my teaching certificate. So I was able to teach. I thought, teaching would be a safe failback in case I decided, I didn't want to be a priest. Well, I ended up being a priest and a teacher because, as Father Ball said, when I was first ordained, the bishop had us teaching school, and not only that, but I was in that group of priests where the bishop sent us to Creighton University, where I got my master's degree in guidance and counseling, a Master of Science in guidance and counseling, as well as my certification to be a principal of one of our high schools. Well, pretty much I stayed on the teaching and guidance and counseling end of things for all the high schools and places that I taught at. I started teaching in Fort Dodge, which would now be called middle school. And then after that, I was moved to Storm Lake, St. Mary's, and taught at St. Mary's High School there for a number of years. And then following that, I was sent to teach at Granville Spalding. And that was my last teaching assignment there at Granville. And that's when he pulled me out of teaching and had me, go to be a pastor in a parish. So those were the schools that I worked with. And, I've enjoyed my teaching career. And, that was good. I enjoyed that. And so then after that, he started giving me assignments to different parishes. Now, let's see. My first one was, I was stationed. Well, let me back up. While we were teaching school, we also had to either be in a parish like St. Mary's Storm Lake as an associate pastor or associate and teach as well. And when I was at Granville Spalding, I was pastor of St. Anthony's in Hotspurs and taught full-time while I was there. So that really kept me busy. Teaching and being pastor and running a parish as well. And a lot of those times when I was there, we did a lot of parish projects to kind of fix up the parishes, get them out of debt, etc. So, and that kind of became my history, where he sent me all the time. I always got sent to places. Well, I need you to go, to Remsen St. Mary's, I, had to get them out of debt. And then we did a tremendous amount of remodeling there in the grade and especially the high school and in the parish, in the church there. We just did a lot of fixing up. And one of the things that I always remember when I was at Remsen St. Mary's, we finished cementing out the basement. It was half cemented out. The other half was not, and it kept feeding moisture up into the church, and so we decided to cement that out. Well, as we were doing that, we discovered that there was sort of a stream or wet spot in that part that wasn't cemented out. We had skid steers down there, and we even got them stuck in it.
Oh boy.
In the basement of the church. Oh, that was kind of interesting. So then we had to, once we fixed that all up and got it all cemented over, that solved the problem that we were having, there in the church. And so anyway, and then that also made it possible, which St. Mary's now they've gotten rid of the boiler and went to forced hot air for heat and air conditioning. Now it's Remsen St. Mary's. So, lots of interesting projects that I had when I was at St. Bernard's in Breda as pastor there. One day I got a call from one of the nuns at what used to be Mount St. Bernard Seminary, and they said, you're pastor there at your parish is St. Bernard's. I said, yeah. And we've got this great big huge statue of St. Bernard here. We'll give it to you if you just come and get it and take it. So, well, I went and looked. Oh, he was a big statue, all right. And he was carved out of Indiana limestone. And so I had to figure out how to move him, and that took me about a year because the weakest part was the neck. When you couldn't really lay him down, I toyed with ideas of laying him down in a truckload of corn, to cushion. But to make a long story short, we ended up putting him on a lowboy semi-trailer flatbed and with air ride. And we hauled St. Bernard's upright from Dubuque to Breda, and we had to avoid all underpasses, because it would whop off his head. And it was a long, long day, about 45 miles an hour from Dubuque to Breda. And but anyway, and we had, so one day before we took him off the truck, I thought, I'm going to have this guy weighed. And he weighed 11 ton.
Wow.
It's a solid piece of Indiana limestone. And that was carved by a pretty famous sculptor by the name of Christensen. I know at the time when I moved him, and they said, well, he's probably worth about $300,000. Well, that was back then. I don't know what he'd be worth today, because it was a hand carving, all one piece. And he's very big.
If we have any young men listening, this just goes to show that the priesthood can be quite an adventure.
Yes.
Yeah. I always say there's never a dull moment.
That's what it sounds like. Well, kind of taking a look backwards, in 1980, you were both young priests in active ministry, and at that time, the diocese had 166 active priests, and today we have 37. So we'd just love to have some insight from both of you. How have things changed, and is this, something that you would have envisioned? So Father Hart, we'll begin with you.
Okay, well, first of all, that's a pretty dramatic change for our diocese, and that's, of course, why we had to close, several parishes. My last parish before I retired was St. Peter and Paul's in West Bend. And I had Mallard also with it. Well, before I retired, the bishop wanted me to close St. Mary's of Mallard. So I did, but in the process of that, I stayed an extra year in active ministry to give the parish time to think about being closed, what we're going to do with the property, how to trying to sell the buildings, and removing all the sacred items from the church. Most of those sacred items and statues and altars and stuff we gave is up at Sioux Center right now in that new parish up there. And one of the things that I did, so that year, that extra year, I'm so glad that I did it that way, because it went a whole lot smoother than I ever anticipated that it would.
Well, and I'm sure that was very valuable to the parishioners, and I bet they're very grateful for that time.
And it gave them time to think about it and make plans, and rather than just boom, all of a sudden, closing them. And to symbolize the closure of St. Mary's, the very last Mass that we had there, they had a huge crucifix at the front in the sanctuary. For the recessional procession out after Mass, we took the cross down, and it was carried by some parishioners out and down the center aisle to symbolize, the parish is now closed.
Oh, wow, that'd be incredibly moving.
Oh, people were crying.
Oh, I'd imagine. I'm sure.
But I mean, it really got the point across, and so, we ended up selling all the buildings and property. So that's how that went. So, but that was the last year of my active priestly ministry, was closing that parish there at St. Mary's in Mallard. So, but one of the things, having so many fewer priests, has been, I think, hard on our diocese. That just caused a lot of hurt feelings, but there's nothing you could do about it. When I was there were 6 in my class when I was ordained and when I went to seminary, and we've never had a class that big since. And I was ordained in 1974. So, and I've been retired now for 7 years, going on, it will be 8 pretty soon. And, but I, with the reduction in priests from that 160 down to where we're at today, one of the things I still do is I help out in a lot of the parishes surrounding Humboldt here, as well as parishes in the Archdiocese of Dubuque. Because, like, for example, I hear a tremendous amount of confessions at Holy Trinity and Fort Dodge, and also the parishes at Divine Mercy, as well as helping hear confessions of school kids. But at Divine Mercy, at Holy Trinity, the 3 Sundays prior to Easter, the 3 Sundays prior to Christmas, what I do is I go down there and help them and hear confessions between the Masses. My line never ends. And the reason I do that is because there's no way that 2 priests down there can hear all the people's confessions. How do I know that? Well, when I was a young priest at Corpus Christi in Fort Dodge, my first assignment, we just had confessions all the time there, and we heard before Masses, and you just had to shut them off, when Mass started and stuff. And when I go down to Holy Trinity and I'm hearing confessions, I just have to shut them off so I can celebrate and go to Mass myself.
Kind of a good problem to have.
Right.
Many people
Yes. And sometimes my line is so long down there at Holy Trinity that Monsignor McCoy or one of the other associates, they say, well, he's never going to get through that line. And so then they hop in the other confessional and help hear confessions so we can, get more of them heard. That's
Oh yeah,
Go ahead.
that's incredibly valuable to all of the parishioners who have that, because I think we're very much at that point where it's getting to be more challenging to be able to access different sacraments, and our retired priests do so much to step in, especially in faith formation programs in Catholic schools, to make that available. Now, going to you, Father Ball, can you share some of your impressions of the changing tides over the years?
I think Father Tom hit it on the head. I look sometimes at my life kind of like when Jesus said, go after the lost sheep. And I go, pastors hardly have time to take care of their sheep and their families right there in the parish. And as a retired priest, I get the opportunity to go after some of those lost sheep, to hear all those confessions. I have confessions tonight in Salix. Next Wednesday, I'm in, Sloan. Last night I heard him in Mapleton and had adoration for them for an hour. And as he said, the line never ends. There are lost sheep out there, and pastors do such an awesome job. But there's always going to be the lost sheep. Even in my hometown of Duncombe, when they close the Duncombe Parish down, I look and say, I hope somebody always goes out and finds my nephews or my nieces and those that just, we don't know what to do. You got to have somebody. And pastors can't do it all. They, as you said, 37, there's just not enough. And I remember what Bishop John Keener said. He says, I'm so thankful that we have a retired priest. And I thought, well, thank you. It was so good to hear that. Reaffirmed, my priesthood again. Because it is so valuable to us to keep our priesthood alive and well. It's not only reaching out to them, it's reaching out into us. And it's affirming us and making us feel worth, feeling the worth in our life that God has placed there, and that our priesthood didn't retire when we retired. And so, as you say, the confessions never end, helping out. I just got called yesterday from the funeral home. Father, are you busy Saturday? And I said, well, they made a mix-up. Can you do a funeral Saturday? So on Saturday, I get to do a funeral because they can't be in two places at once. So there are so many opportunities. One of the positive things that I've seen, though, Father Kelly and I went up, and we've done this the last couple of years. We go down to the seminaries and visit.
Good.
And there's more and more seminarians. You need to go and visit. Like we went up to St. Paul about 3 or 4 months ago. He says, we're packed. We're packed with seminarians. So I never look at it and say, the Lord has forgot us. I look at it and say, Jemini, the Lord is changing us again. And he's going to send us more priests. And I look forward to that. So when I look at their seminaries, and I've gone down to St. Louis, and they're packed with seminarians, and I'm going, yeah, the Lord has done good.
We need that.
So I'm glad that the Lord has sent me out and keeps me busy. Just as Father Tom said, he keeps us busy, and we are thankful. Keeps us healthy.
Speaking of you being busy, if I'm not mistaken, because I get the St. Therese of Lisieux bulletin. I love looking at other bulletins. Your name is on there a lot. You are just even that parish alone. It seems like they really use you and keep you busy.
Yeah, and I am. I'm glad to be there. Every pastor is different, and then how they decide to use their retired priest within their midst. And so when Father Bill took over the place, and I said, okay, when people say they're going to retire and do nothing, I bury those people. I says, I'm not going to bury myself. I said, so if you want me to stay here, you got to keep me busy. And that's what he's done. And I appreciate that, the fact that he has used me. That way, as I said, you can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
So, as he said, I've got 13 weddings this year. Can you do a few of the weddings? And I go, yep, yeah. Let me know what I can do and who's wants to be available for me too. So, yeah, I can't imagine. If I had 13 weddings, I'm going,
Yeah.
And that's all you'd be doing is doing wedding
prep
and all of that. And that's not even counting all the funerals he has. And I go, God, if you'd be overwhelmed. But so I go, hey, if I can help out, let me help out. And he says, yep, this is what you can do. So I've got 5 weddings this year.
that is a lot. And don't I see pictures of you at the Danbury School too, visiting classrooms now and then?
Every other week.
Oh.
Every other week. He has mass on Fridays, so he sees the kids on Fridays. And I try to stop in about every other week on Thursdays. I figure, and just go in and see the kids. And I think vocations, I'm a firm believer that there's vocations right in front of me. And it used to be you could talk to the high school kids, because that's where the vocations would start, like for me. Now, you got to be 4th grade, you got to be 3rd grade. You got to implant that seed when they're very, very young. So I enjoy going in. I'm a storyteller at heart, so I can sit and tell stories to them, and they love to hear. Tell me a story, or play a game with me, and a religious game. And I thank the Lord for giving me that ability to be comfortable around young people, and so it's fun to just go in and be with them, but also talk about. By the way, somebody out there is supposed to take my place. I'm supposed to give this collar to somebody else, and I think that will hopefully inspire somebody. And just like I would needed to have that inspiration and say, hey, maybe I should be a priest. Maybe I should be a sister. Maybe it'd be okay to do that.
And grandmothers and mothers, we also must affirm those vocations as well. They say
yes.
Grandmothers, very powerful. So, okay, Xander, my grandson, seminary for you. Now, speaking of schools, Father Hart, I know that's part of what keeps you busy in retirement. Do you want to just share a little bit of, it was hard to schedule these guys, by the way, share a little bit with us about your retirement, so to speak.
Well, I keep busy, still involved with schools. And what I do is I drive a school bus for Humboldt Community School District. Every parish that I've been in, I always, drove school bus. Like, for example, when I was at St. Mary's in Storm Lake, I always drove the basketball team to their games and stuff like that. And, I didn't ask for a salary or anything, but because I helped Storm Lake community out and drove their buses, they got to know me and trust me. And they said to me one day, they said, Father, why don't you guys at St. Mary's, why don't you just use our school buses to take the kids, to their activities? And so that's how that started. There is, and they were very reasonable with what the only thing they did was charge us mileage, which was basically fuel mileage for the school bus whenever we used it. But, so there's such a shortage of them, and wherever I go, I was just a substitute, but now since I've retired, I do drive full time here for Humboldt Community. I have a route, had my route this morning and will tonight. And I also drive for activities, whether it's sports or the band or whatnot. Like this past Saturday, I took the band, especially the jazz ensemble, down to Huxley for a jazz festival down there. And, when you do that, there's you get to know the kids, you get to know some of their parents, you visit with them, and, just a lot of good things come out of that. And probably one of my best perks, if you will, was when I took and drove the band kids to Iowa State. And they have what they call band extravaganza, and they invite different schools to come to that. And I'll tell you, down there at Stevens Auditorium at Iowa State, to listen to the Iowa State marching band with 300 and some brass instruments playing in the stadium, I thought I died and went to heaven. The music, I never heard music like that. It was just fantastic to experience that performance. And I've done that, twice or three times now, where taken the band kids down and went to that. Normally they perform, on the football field or wherever, but here they're in the stadium, in the auditorium. So, boy, that was quite an experience, and the kids got it was good experience for them as well. And then they had their ensemble play. I've never seen or heard in my life such crisp, sharp music being played as what I did down there. Just amazing,
True pros. So with your vicinity to Humboldt there, are you helping out with, I know you're busy during the week with the bus driving and the activities, but are you helping out with weekends, Humboldt, Algona, any of those, Fort Dodge?
Yes. Oh, yeah. When I go to Mass, I always go on Sunday morning here at St. Mary's.
Okay.
And every Sunday I hear confessions before Mass, help Father out. So there's two of us hearing confessions before Mass. And then I also help to distribute communion at Mass as well. So that's every Sunday that I'm here in Humboldt. Of course, when I'm out at another parish, then I can't do that because, I'm celebrating Mass somewhere else, whether it's Holy Trinity or one of the Divine Mercy parishes or one of the parishes in the Archdiocese of Dubuque. So, but, I stay busy. And I also have served on different committees for the Humboldt Community School District. They always seem to keep me busy.
They've got your number.
The last one that we just finished was remodeling the auditorium here. And I was one of the money fundraisers for that $1 million plus project. And prior to that, I was on a committee for new facilities and remodeling facilities for the school district. And that was a $10 million project. So, yes, I keep busy.
So part-time development as well. And you had mentioned earlier all the confessions and so forth. So,
yes.
If y'all didn't know, or the retired priests are not sitting at home playing video games or taking naps, they're not. And if you've ever tried to schedule an appointment with these guys, they are busy.
I'm so busy, I still don't get a nap most days of the week. I haven't mastered that part yet.
That's okay. You keep doing what you're doing. Got to keep you guys healthy.
Yes. Well, I have to say, our episodes with retired priests in the diocese are always some of my favorites. I think just that witness of the fullness of life and joy that's found in the vocation of the priesthood just brings so much hope. And I really hope that all of the young men and women who are blessed to, enjoy your presence and your examples in their lives can really value that testimony that you both give to the joy of the priesthood, but the joy of also just a vocation of the Lord calling you to himself. So thank you both for all of your service to our parishes, past, present, and future. And thank you, Father Ball and Father Hart, for joining us today amongst the busyness of the bus routes and the confessions and the funerals. So for all those who do have a retired priest who help serve their parish, make sure you say thank you to them and remember them always. And then also just keep in mind that this Easter we will have the collection for retired infirm priests. And so this is another great way of showing your appreciation to those who have served us.
Yes. For Father Ball.
And if you aren't generous enough, we just found out today that Father Hart is one.
Yeah, he's a good fundraiser.
So. No, we know that people are so generous and are appreciative of both of you. And then thank you for our listeners as well for taking the time to listen to today's Illuminating Catholics episode and learning more about the lives of our retired priests and how they continue to serve us. New episodes drop each Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts, the Diocese of Sioux City YouTube channel, or at lumenmedia.org.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church. Follow us for more episodes on topics of the Catholic faith. For more diocesan news, visit lumenmedia.org.